The mud sucked at Olivia Vaughn's boots as she struggled through the canyon trail. Every step forward accompanied by the squelching sound of wet earth reluctantly releasing its grip. When she spotted the wagon ahead tilted dangerously to one side with a man desperately trying to free his horse from the mire that seemed determined to swallow everything whole. Ruby City, Nevada, had seen its share of spring storms in 1878, but this one had turned the mountain passes into treacherous rivers of brown sludge that trapped anyone foolish enough to attempt the journey. Olivia had left the mining town 3 hours earlier with supplies for her family's homestead, but the weather had other plans. Now, as she approached the stranded wagon, she could see the man's frustration etched across his sun-weathered face. "Need help?" She called out, setting down her own small pack. The cowboy looked up, surprise evident in his dark eyes. He was tall, probably in his mid-20s, with dust-brown hair plastered to his forehead from the rain that had finally stopped an hour ago. His shirt clung to broad shoulders, and mud covered him from waist to boots. "Madam, I would not want to trouble you," he said, his voice carrying a slight drawl that spoke of somewhere further south. "This here cart is loaded heavy, and the mud has got it good." Olivia pushed a strand of auburn hair from her face, tucking it behind her ear. At 22, she had lived in Nevada long enough to know that pride killed more people than practicality saved. "2 sets of hands are better than one, and I've got a strong back. What do you need me to do?" The cowboy hesitated, then seemed to recognize the same stubborn determination he probably possessed. "Name is Daniel Webster. I appreciate the offer, truly." "Olivia Vaughn. Now tell me where to push." Daniel explained his plan. The wheel on the left side had sunk deep into a rut hidden beneath the mud. His horse, a sturdy chestnut mare, could pull if they could just lift the wagon enough to get the wheel onto solid ground. The problem was the weight. Daniel had been hauling building supplies, lumber and nails and tools for a ranch he planned to work on south of Ruby City. Olivia moved to the back of the cart, positioning herself beside one of the supports. Daniel unhitched the mare and led her forward, giving them slack to work with. Then he joined Olivia at the back. "On 3, he said. 1, 2, 3, they heaved upward, muscles straining. The cart shifted slightly but fell back with a wet thud. Olivia's boots slid in the mud and she nearly went down but caught herself against the wooden frame. "Again," she said, breathing hard. Daniel looked at her with something like respect. "You sure?" "Again." They tried 5 more times, each attempt leaving them more exhausted and covered in mud. On the 6th try, Olivia felt something give. The wheel lifted, moved forward an inch. Daniel must have felt it too because he shouted to the mare, who pulled with renewed effort. "Keep going," Olivia yelled, putting every ounce of strength she had into lifting. The wheel found purchase on something solid beneath the mud. The cart lurched forward suddenly, and both Olivia and Daniel stumbled, this time going down into the mire together. Olivia landed on her side with Daniel falling nearby, both of them completely covered in the thick brown mud. For a moment, they just lay there, breathing hard. Then Daniel started laughing, a deep, genuine sound that made Olivia smile despite the cold mud seeping through her clothes. "Well, that worked," she said, pushing herself up to sitting. Daniel sat up too, wiping mud from his face. "Madam, I do not know how to thank you proper." Most folks would have ridden right past. Olivia looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. Beneath the mud, he had kind eyes, the sort that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. There was something honest about his face, an openness that she rarely saw in the hard men who populated the mining towns. "Most folks would not have been out in this weather to begin with," she replied, accepting his hand as he helped her stand. "We are both fools, I suppose." Speaking of which, where are you headed? You should not be traveling alone. My family's homestead, about 8 miles north. I was fetching supplies from Ruby City. She gestured to her pack, which had miraculously stayed relatively clean on its perch atop a boulder. Daniel frowned, looking at the sky. It will be dark in a few hours. These trails are dangerous enough in daylight. I know them well enough. I am sure you do, but would you allow me to escort you? It is the least I can do after you helped me. Olivia started to refuse, then reconsidered. The truth was, the trail would be more treacherous now with all the mud, and having company would not hurt. Besides, there was something about Daniel Webster that made her want to know more about him. All right, she agreed, but we should get moving. I do not want my mother worrying more than she already will. Daniel retrieved his horse and cart, checking the wheel to ensure it had not been damaged. Satisfied, he helped Olivia with her pack, securing it in the wagon bed. They started north, Daniel leading the mare while Olivia walked beside him. So what brings you to Nevada? Olivia asked as they navigated around a particularly deep puddle. Work, mostly. I have been drifting since I left Texas 3 years back. Heard the Parker Ranch south of Ruby City was hiring, and I figured it was time to settle somewhere. He glanced at her. What about your family? How long have you been out here? 6 years. My father thought he would strike it rich in the mines like everyone else. He did not, but he found good land for farming instead. We grow what we can, raise some chickens and goats. It is a simple life, but it is ours. They talked as they walked, the conversation flowing easily despite having just met. Daniel told her about growing up in Texas, about learning to work cattle from his father before a drought destroyed their ranch. He spoke of drifting through Colorado and Wyoming, taking work where he could find it, always moving. There was a loneliness in his voice that resonated with Olivia. She told him about leaving Missouri with her family, about the journey west that had killed her youngest brother to fever. She spoke of the harsh Nevada winters and the beautiful summers, of learning to shoot to protect their livestock from predators, of the small community that had formed around Ruby City despite the rough conditions. The miles passed more quickly with company. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they reached a fork in the trail. Olivia pointed to the left path. Just another mile, she said. The Vaughn homestead sat in a small valley, protected from the worst winds by rocky outcroppings on 3 sides. A modest house built from local timber stood beside a well-maintained barn. Chickens pecked in a fenced yard, and Olivia could see her mother hanging laundry that would need to come down soon. Margaret Vaughn looked up as they approached, her expression shifting from worry to relief to curiosity. She was a handsome woman in her late 40s, with the same auburn hair as her daughter, now streaked with gray. Olivia, I was about to send your father looking for you. Her eyes moved to Daniel, taking in his mud-covered appearance and the wagon. Who is your friend? Mama, this is Daniel Webster. I helped him free his cart from the mud on the canyon trail, and he insisted on escorting me home. Margaret's expression softened. That was kind of you, Mr. Webster. Please, you must stay for supper. It is the least we can offer for seeing our daughter home safely. Daniel looked uncomfortable. Madam, I appreciate the offer, but I am covered in mud and not fit for company. Nonsense. We have a wash basin and my husband has clean clothes you can borrow. I insist. Olivia caught Daniel's eye and shrugged with a small smile. You cannot refuse my mother. Believe me, I have tried. Daniel relented, and soon he was washing up while Olivia changed into dry clothes. When they gathered for supper, Olivia's father Thomas had returned from checking the northern fence line. He was a stocky man with a thick beard and calloused hands that spoke of hard work. Over a meal of venison stew and fresh bread, Daniel charmed the entire Vaughn family. He spoke respectfully to Thomas about farming in Nevada, asked intelligent questions, and made Margaret laugh with stories from his travels. Olivia's younger sister Emma, who was 17, kept giggling until Olivia kicked her under the table. "So you will be working at the Parker Ranch?" Thomas asked, sopping up stew with his bread. "Yes, sir. I start in 3 days. I am hoping to save enough to eventually start a small place of my own." "That is a good goal. This land is hard, but it rewards honest work." After supper, as Margaret and Emma cleared the dishes, Olivia walked Daniel out to his wagon. The night had turned cool and stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. The earlier storm seemed like a distant memory. "Thank you for supper," Daniel said. "Your family is wonderful." "Thank you for seeing me home, and for the conversation. It was nice to talk to someone new." Daniel hesitated, then said, "Miss Vaughn, would it be all right if I called on you sometime? I know I am just a ranch hand with nothing much to offer, but I would like to see you again." Olivia felt warmth spread through her chest. "I would like that, Mr. Webster. Daniel, please. Then you must call me Olivia." He smiled, that genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Olivia, that is a pretty name. When do you think you might visit? May I come by this Sunday? I will have settled in at the ranch by then, and I believe we get Sundays off." "Sunday would be perfect." Daniel climbed onto his wagon, then looked back down at her. "I am glad I got stuck in that mud today." Olivia laughed. "So am I." She watched him drive away, the wagon disappearing into the darkness. When she turned back to the house, she found her mother standing in the doorway, a knowing smile on her face. "He seems like a good man," Margaret said. "He does," Olivia agreed. "And handsome, too." "Mama," Margaret laughed. "I am just saying what you are thinking. Come inside before you catch cold." That night, lying in her bed, Olivia replayed every moment of the afternoon. The way Daniel had looked at her with surprise when she offered to help. His laugh when they fell in the mud. The easy conversation on the walk home. The way her heart had skipped when he asked to call on her. She barely knew him, but something felt different about Daniel Webster. Something right. Sunday arrived with agonizing slowness. Olivia found herself distracted from her chores, earning teasing comments from Emma and patient understanding from her mother. She changed her dress 3 times before Margaret finally told her she looked beautiful and to stop fussing. Daniel arrived mid-afternoon, riding the same chestnut mare, now clean and groomed. He had cleaned up well too, wearing newer clothes and a hat that shaded his eyes from the bright sun. He carried wildflowers that he must have picked along the way. "For you," he said, presenting them to Olivia with an almost shy smile. "They are beautiful. Thank you." They walked together, leaving the homestead to explore the valley. Olivia showed him her favorite spots. A creek that ran cold and clear, a grove of juniper trees that smelled like heaven, a rocky outcrop that provided a view of the entire valley. "It is peaceful here," Daniel said as they sat on the rocks, looking out over the land. "Different from Texas, but beautiful in its own way." "Do you miss it?" "Texas?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "I miss what it was before the drought. I miss my parents, though they are both gone now. But the place itself? No, I do not think I miss it. Too many bad memories tied up with the good." "I understand that. Sometimes I miss Missouri, but mostly I miss who we were before we left, before we lost Bobby. Coming west changes people." "It does," Daniel agreed, "but not always for the worse." They talked for hours, sitting on those rocks. Daniel told her about starting work at the Parker Ranch, about the other ranch hands and the vast herds of cattle. He spoke of his dreams to own land, to build something permanent instead of always drifting. Olivia shared her own hopes. To see more of the world beyond Nevada, to perhaps teach school someday, though there was no school yet in Ruby City. She spoke of her fears, too, about her father getting older and the farm becoming harder to maintain, about Emma's future in a place where eligible young men were scarce. As the afternoon waned, they walked back slowly, neither wanting the day to end. At the homestead, Daniel was invited to stay for supper again, and this time he accepted without hesitation. Over the following months, Sunday became Olivia's favorite day. Daniel visited every week without fail, regardless of whether or how tired he was from work. Sometimes they walked. Sometimes they sat on the porch and talked while Margaret pretended not to eavesdrop. Occasionally, Daniel helped Thomas with projects around the homestead, earning the older man's respect and approval. In June, Daniel brought Olivia into Ruby City for the summer dance. The entire town turned out for the event, held in the largest saloon with the gambling tables pushed aside to make room. Olivia wore her best dress, a deep blue cotton that Margaret had helped her sew. Daniel could not take his eyes off her. "You look beautiful," he said when he first saw her. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, admiring his pressed shirt and bolo tie. They danced until Olivia's feet ached, then danced some more. Daniel was a good dancer, moving with a natural grace that surprised her. Between songs, they stepped outside for fresh air, and Daniel bought them lemonade from a vendor. "I am having a wonderful time," Olivia said, fanning herself with her hand. "So am I." Daniel set down his cup and took her hand. "Olivia, these past few months have been the happiest I can remember. I know I am just a ranch hand, and I do not have much to offer yet, but I am saving every penny I can. I want to build something, to be someone worthy of you." Olivia squeezed his hand. "You already are worthy, Daniel. You do not need to prove anything to me. Maybe not to you, but to myself. And to your father, so I can ask him properly." Her heart leaped. "Ask him what?" Daniel smiled. "You know what, but I want to do it right. I want to have land of my own, a house to bring you to. I want to be able to provide for you the way you deserve." "And how long will that take?" "A year, maybe 2. I have been talking to Tom Parker about buying a section of land at the edge of his ranch. He is willing to sell it to me at a fair price, and I am almost halfway to having enough saved." Olivia wanted to tell him she would marry him tomorrow, land or no land. But she understood his pride, his need to feel he was bringing something to the marriage. So instead, she said, "Then I will wait. But not too long, Daniel Webster. I am not a patient woman." He laughed and pulled her close, right there on the street with half the town walking by. "I will work as fast as I can, I promise." That summer turned to fall and fall to winter. Daniel continued his Sunday visits, though sometimes the weather made the journey impossible. On those weeks, Olivia found herself staring out the window, worried despite knowing he was safe at the ranch. Christmas came and the Vaughns invited Daniel to celebrate with them. He arrived with gifts, a warm shawl for Margaret, tobacco for Thomas, hair ribbons for Emma, and for Olivia, a beautiful leather-bound journal. "For writing down your thoughts," he said as she opened it. "You mentioned wanting to teach, and all good teachers should write." Olivia threw her arms around him, not caring that her family was watching. "It is perfect. Thank you." That evening, after the gifts were opened and the special meal eaten, Daniel asked Thomas to step outside with him. Olivia knew what was coming, and her heart pounded as she waited. Emma grabbed her hand, squeezing it excitedly. When they came back inside 10 minutes later, both men were smiling. Daniel looked at Olivia, and she saw everything she needed to know in his eyes. Later, after he had left and the family was preparing for bed, Thomas pulled Olivia aside. "That young man asked my permission to marry you once he has his land purchased and a house built. I gave him my blessing." "Oh, Papa!" Olivia hugged her father tight. He is a good man, Olivia. He will work hard for you, provide for you. I can see how much he loves you. I love him too. I know you do, sweetheart. I know you do. The winter seemed longer than usual, but spring finally arrived in 1879. Daniel's visits became even more precious as he worked double shifts at the ranch, trying to save the last of the money he needed. Olivia helped where she could, selling eggs in town and saving every penny. In April, Daniel arrived at the homestead during the week, surprising everyone. Olivia was in the garden when she heard the horse, and she looked up to see him riding hard up the path. Her stomach dropped, worried something was wrong, but when he dismounted, he was grinning like she had never seen. "I did it," he said, sweeping her up and spinning her around. "I bought the land, 40 acres with water rights to the creek. Tom Parker sold it to me at the price we agreed on, and I just signed the papers at the land office in Ruby City." Olivia laughed and cried at the same time. "That is wonderful. I am so proud of you. I start building the house next week. Some of the other ranch hands have agreed to help in their free time. Tom says if I work hard, I can have it finished by August." "August," Olivia repeated, the reality sinking in. "We can be married in August, if you will have me." "I have not officially asked yet." Olivia pulled back to look at him. "Then ask." Daniel took both her hands, suddenly serious. "Olivia Vaughn, you helped me when I was a stranger stuck in the mud. You did not have to stop, but you did. That day changed my life in ways I never expected. You are the kindest, strongest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. I love you with everything I have. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Olivia said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He kissed her then properly for the first time. It was sweet and perfect, and everything Olivia had dreamed about during the long months of waiting. The next few months passed in a whirlwind of activity. Daniel worked on the house every spare moment, and Olivia visited the property as often as she could. It was beautiful land, with the creek running through it and views of the distant mountains. The house took shape slowly. A simple structure with 2 rooms to start, with plans to add on later. Olivia worked with her mother to sew her wedding dress, a simple white cotton with lace at the collar that had belonged to Margaret's mother. Emma helped gather wildflowers for the bouquet, and Thomas began building furniture for the new house. In early August, with the house complete and furnished with the basics, Daniel and Olivia were married in a small ceremony at the homestead. The local preacher from Ruby City officiated, and the entire community seemed to turn out for the celebration. Tom Parker came with his wife and gave Daniel the rest of the day off, joking that he could spare him for his wedding day, standing under an arch that Emma had decorated with flowers and ribbons. Olivia looked into Daniel's eyes as they spoke their vows. His voice was steady and sure, and when he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, she felt her whole world shift and settle into place. "I love you," he whispered after the preacher pronounced them married. "I love you too," she whispered back. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with dancing and food and laughter. But eventually, Daniel helped Olivia onto his horse, and they rode together to their new home under a sky full of stars. The house was small but perfect. Daniel had built a sturdy bed frame, and Margaret had gifted them a beautiful quilt. There was a table with 2 chairs, a cook stove, and hooks for hanging clothes. But more than the furnishings, it was theirs, a place they would build their life together. That first night, Olivia stood in the doorway looking out at the land while Daniel started a fire in the stove to ward off the evening chill. "What are you thinking?" he asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I am thinking about the day we met. How I almost did not stop when I saw you stuck in the mud. I was tired and cold and just wanted to get home. I am glad you stopped. So am I. I keep wondering what my life would be like if I had ridden past, if I had not helped you. Daniel turned her to face him. But you did help me. And I never forgot it. From that moment, covered in mud and laughing, I knew you were someone special. Every mile of that walk to your homestead, I was falling for you. When I left that night, I knew I would come back. I knew I had to see you again. And here we are. Here we are, he agreed. Husband and wife, in our own home. They stayed up late that first night, talking about their plans for the future. Daniel wanted to expand the herd, maybe buy some cattle of his own to run on their land. Olivia wanted to start a garden and maybe, eventually, children. The conversation drifted from practical matters to dreams, from the immediate future to the distant horizon of years stretching ahead of them. When they finally went to bed, Olivia lay in Daniel's arms feeling completely content. This was what she had waited for. This moment, this man, this life they would build together. The first year of marriage was an adjustment, as all first years are. Olivia learned to manage a household on her own, though her mother was always nearby for advice. She started her garden, growing vegetables and herbs. Daniel worked long days at the Parker Ranch, but always came home to her in the evenings, and they would sit together on their small porch, watching the sun set over their land. They had arguments, small ones about silly things like how to arrange the kitchen or whether they could afford to buy a milk cow. But they always talked through their disagreements, neither willing to let the sun set on anger. In the spring of 1880, Olivia realized she was pregnant. She told Daniel one evening after supper, simply and directly, "I am going to have a baby." Daniel stared at her for a moment, then let out a whoop of joy that probably carried all the way to the Parker Ranch. He lifted her carefully, mindfully, and spun her once before setting her down. "Are you sure? Are you all right? Do we need to get the doctor?" Olivia laughed at his sudden nervousness. "I am sure I am fine and we do not need the doctor yet. Babies take time, Daniel. A baby. We are going to have a baby." He said it like he was trying to convince himself it was real. "We are going to have a baby," Olivia confirmed. That night, Daniel lay with his hand on her still flat stomach, talking to the child that was growing there. Olivia fell asleep to the sound of his voice, telling their baby about the day they met, about how their mother had pulled a stranger's cart through the mud and changed everything. The pregnancy progressed without major complications. Margaret visited often, helping Olivia prepare for the baby. They sewed tiny clothes and blankets. Daniel began work on an addition to the house, determined to have a proper nursery ready. Tom Parker was understanding, giving Daniel more flexible hours when he could. In November, when the first snow was falling, Olivia went into labor. Margaret and the midwife from Ruby City were both present, along with Emma, who had insisted on helping despite her squeamishness. Daniel paced outside for hours, too nervous to sit still. Thomas stood with him, smoking his pipe and occasionally offering words of encouragement. "It will be fine, son. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "I know, but this is Olivia. What if something goes wrong?" "Nothing will go wrong. My Margaret is in there and that midwife has delivered half the babies in the county. Olivia is strong, she will be fine." When the baby's cry finally pierced the night air, Daniel nearly broke down the door getting inside. He found Olivia exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets they had made. "A boy," she said softly. "We have a son." Daniel approached slowly, almost reverently. When he looked down at his son's small red face, he felt his chest tighten with emotion. "He is perfect. Would you like to hold him?" Daniel took the baby carefully, cradling him against his chest. The infant was so small, so fragile. Daniel felt the weight of responsibility settle over him like a mantle. This tiny person would depend on him for everything. It was terrifying and wonderful all at once. "What should we name him?" Olivia asked. They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now, looking at his son, Daniel said, "Robert, after your brother, Robert Thomas Webster." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "That is perfect. Mama will be so happy." Margaret was indeed happy, crying as she held her grandson. Emma cooed over the baby, already imagining herself as the favorite aunt. Thomas shook Daniel's hand solemnly, welcoming him fully into the fraternity of fatherhood. Life with a newborn was exhausting but joyful. Olivia threw herself into motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything. Daniel woke for night feedings, walking the floor with Robert when he fussed, singing old songs his own father had sung to him. As Robert grew from infant to toddler, the Webster home grew too. Daniel added another room, then expanded the barn to house the small herd they were building. The cattle venture was paying off, slowly but surely. They were not rich by any means, but they were comfortable and their future looked bright. In 1882, Olivia became pregnant again. This time, she delivered a daughter in the spring, a tiny girl with her mother's auburn hair and her father's dark eyes. They named her Margaret Rose after both grandmothers. "Two children," Daniel said, holding his daughter while watching Robert play on the floor. "We are truly blessed." "We are," Olivia agreed. "Sometimes I think about that day in the mud, how tired and cold I was, how I almost kept going. But you did not. But I did not. And now look at us. A home, children, a life, all because I stopped to help a stranger." Daniel smiled. "You know, I kept that shirt. The one I was wearing that day. It is still covered in dried mud and it is falling apart, but I kept it. Why? Because it reminds me that sometimes the most important moments in our lives do not look important at the time. They look like just another challenge, another difficulty to overcome. But that mud, that stuck wagon, that was the moment my real life began." Olivia reached over and took his hand. "Mine too." The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own challenges and joys. There were hard winters when money was tight and they worried about making it through. There were good years when the cattle brought high prices and they could afford small luxuries. Through it all, Daniel and Olivia faced everything together, their love deepening with each shared experience. Robert grew into a strong, quiet boy who loved helping his father with the cattle. Margaret Rose was more outgoing, chattering constantly and charming everyone she met. In 1885, Olivia gave birth to another son whom they named Thomas Daniel, and in 1887, another daughter arrived, tiny Catherine Elizabeth. The house continued to expand to accommodate the growing family. Daniel proved to be a skilled builder, and with help from friends and family, he added rooms and a second story. The property prospered too. They now ran 50 head of cattle on their land, and Daniel had established himself as a respected rancher in the community. Emma married in 1884, a young store owner from Ruby City, and she and Olivia remained close despite the distance. Thomas and Margaret Vaughn stayed healthy and active, though they were slowing down as the years advanced. They sold their homestead in 1886 and moved to a smaller house in Ruby City, closer to Emma and her growing family. One evening in the spring of 1888, almost exactly 10 years after they had married, Daniel and Olivia sat on their porch watching the sunset. The children were inside, Robert supposedly watching the younger ones, though there was a suspicious amount of giggling happening. 10 years, Daniel said, echoing Olivia's thoughts. Has it really been that long? It has. And somehow it feels like both forever and no time at all. If you could go back, knowing everything that would happen, would you still stop to help that day? Olivia looked at him, surprised. Of course I would. Would you still have gotten stuck in the mud? Daniel laughed. I do not think I had much choice in that matter, but yes, I would. 1,000 times over, I would get stuck in that exact spot, on that exact day, if it meant meeting you. We have built a good life, have we not? The best life, Daniel agreed. Better than I ever dreamed possible when I was drifting from place to place, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. Do you ever think about those days? Before? Sometimes. But it feels like another lifetime. Like that was a different person who eventually became me. Olivia understood exactly what he meant. The woman who had pulled a stranger's cart through the mud felt like a different person too. Younger, more naive perhaps, but also braver than she had known at the time. That woman had not hesitated to help someone in need, had not worried about propriety or convenience. She had simply seen someone struggling and acted. "I am glad she helped you," Olivia said softly. "That girl I used to be, I am glad she was kind. I am glad too, and I have never forgotten it. Every day, I try to remember that kindness, to pass it along to others." It was true. Daniel had become known in the community as someone who would help a neighbor without being asked. He had pulled more than one stranded traveler from the mud over the years, always refusing payment and telling them to help someone else in turn. It had become a sort of philosophy for him, a way of living that honored how their life together had begun. As 1888 turned to 1889, the Webster family continued to thrive. Robert, now 8 years old, was already talking about becoming a rancher like his father. Margaret Rose, at 7, announced she wanted to be a teacher, which delighted Olivia. Thomas, at 4, was still trying to figure out the world, and baby Catherine was toddling around getting into everything. The territory of Nevada was growing and changing around them. Ruby City had expanded, with new businesses opening regularly. There was talk of eventually becoming a state, though that was still years away. The wild, rough edges of the place were slowly being smoothed over by civilization, but it retained its frontier character. In July of that year, a massive summer storm swept through the region, bringing heavy rains that turned the roads to rivers of mud. Daniel was in town when it hit, and Olivia spent an anxious afternoon watching from the window, worried about him making it home safely. When he finally arrived, soaked through but unhurt, she rushed out to meet him. "I was so worried," she said, holding him tight despite the mud and water. "I am fine. The roads are terrible, though. I passed 3 wagons stuck in the mud on the way home. Did you stop to help?" Daniel gave her a knowing smile. "Of course I did. How could I not?" That night, as they lay in bed listening to the rain pound against the roof, Daniel said, "I was thinking today while I was helping those people. I was thinking about how we met. We often think about that day." "I know, but today it struck me differently. I realized that the ring I gave you, the one you wear every day, it came from that moment. I bought it with money I earned after we met, after you helped me. I had no ring to offer you that day in the mud. I had nothing at all. But I carried the memory of your kindness with me, and it shaped everything that came after." Olivia looked at her wedding band, still shiny despite years of wear. She had never thought about it quite that way before. This ring, this symbol of their marriage, had indeed come from that moment in the mud. It was not just a piece of jewelry. It was a promise made real, a thank you transformed into a lifetime commitment. "I like thinking of it that way," she said, "that I helped you and you came back with a ring. I came back with more than a ring. I came back with a promise to always remember, to always honor what you did for me, and I hope I have kept that promise." "You have, Daniel. Every single day you have kept that promise." The years rolled on as years do. The children grew, and the ranch prospered. In 1891, Robert began taking on more responsibilities, learning the business side of ranching from his father. Margaret Rose started attending the new school that had finally opened in Ruby City, and she was already the teacher's favorite student. Thomas and Catherine were inseparable, always getting into mischief together. Thomas Vaughn passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1892, at the age of 68. The whole community turned out for the funeral, a testament to the respect he had earned over his years in Nevada. Margaret grieved but remained strong, moving in with Emma and her family. Life continued its forward march. In 1895, Olivia gave birth to what she swore would be their last child, another daughter they named Sarah Jane. Daniel, now approaching 40, joked that he was getting too old for sleepless nights with a newborn, but Olivia saw how he melted every time he held the baby. 5 children, she said one evening, watching Daniel rock Sarah Jane to sleep. We have created quite a legacy. That we have. Though I think our legacy is more than just children. Look at what we have built here. This ranch, this home, this life. We started with nothing but determination and 40 acres of rough land. And a memory of kindness, Olivia added. And that, Daniel agreed. Always that. The turn of the century found the Websters well-established pillars of their community. Robert, at 19, was courting a young woman from a neighboring ranch. Margaret Rose, at 18, was indeed planning to become a teacher, having passed her teaching examination with high marks. The younger children were thriving, each developing their own personalities and interests. Daniel and Olivia, both in their early 40s now, had settled into a comfortable partnership that felt as natural as breathing. They still held hands when they walked. They still talked for hours on the porch after the children were in bed. The passion of youth had transformed into something deeper, more enduring. One day in the spring of 1901, Olivia was working in her garden when a young couple rode up the path. Their wagon was loaded with household goods, and they had the look of people new to the territory. The man appeared frustrated, gesturing back down the road. "Excuse me, madam," he called out. "Could you tell us how far to Ruby City?" "We have been trying to follow the main road, but I think we took a wrong turn." Olivia straightened, brushing dirt from her hands. "You are about 5 miles out. The road you want is back the way you came, then left at the big juniper tree." "Thank you. We appreciate it." He started to turn the wagon. "Wait," Olivia said. "Are you too new to Nevada?" The young woman spoke up. "Yes, madam, we are from Iowa, looking to start fresh out here." Olivia saw something familiar in their faces, a combination of hope and uncertainty that she remembered feeling all those years ago. She walked closer to the wagon. "If you do not mind some advice, the mercantile in Ruby City is run by my sister. Tell her Olivia Webster sent you, and she will help you find what you need. Also, there is a boarding house on Main Street that is clean and affordable while you look for land. The owner is named Mrs. Patterson. Tell her I sent you there too." The couple looked grateful and a bit surprised. "That is very kind of you," the young man said. "We help each other out here. That is how we survive. Safe travels to you both." As they drove away, Daniel came out of the barn, having heard the conversation. He put his arm around Olivia's shoulders. "You sent them to Emma and Mrs. Patterson." "I did. They looked like they could use some guidance." Daniel smiled. "You are still doing it, still helping strangers." "Well, I learned from the best. You have helped every person who has come through here needing assistance. Because you taught me what kindness looks like. What it means to stop, even when it is inconvenient, and help someone." They stood together, watching the wagon disappear down the road. How many people had they helped over the years? How many strangers had become friends? It was impossible to count, but Olivia knew that each act of kindness echoed that first moment in the mud. In 1903, Robert married his sweetheart in a beautiful ceremony at the ranch. The whole property was decorated for the occasion, and it seemed like half of Nevada had turned out to celebrate. As Olivia watched her eldest son pledge his life to another person, she found herself thinking about her own wedding day, about standing under that flower-covered arch and looking into Daniel's eyes. "What are you thinking?" Daniel whispered, standing beside her. "About us. About how fast time goes. It does go fast, but I would not change a moment of it. Neither would I." Margaret Rose left for training college in California in 1904, determined to become the best teacher she could be. Olivia cried when she left but was proud of her daughter's ambition and drive. Thomas, now a strapping young man of 19, took over more of the ranch work, allowing Daniel to slow down a bit. Catherine married in 1905, a young doctor who had come to Ruby City to establish a practice. Sarah Jane, now 10, was the baby of the family and enjoyed the attention that came with that position. In 1907, Robert and his wife presented Daniel and Olivia with their first grandchild, a boy they named Daniel Jr. Holding his grandson, Daniel felt the circle of life complete itself in a way that left him speechless with emotion. "Your great-grandfather would have been proud," he told the baby. "All of them would have been proud. We have built something good here, something that will last." Olivia, watching her husband with their grandchild, felt overwhelming gratitude for the life they had built. It had not always been easy. There had been struggles and hardships, losses and disappointments. But through it all, they had each other. That foundation, built on an act of kindness in the mud all those years ago, had proved unshakable. The years continued. More grandchildren arrived, each one a blessing. Margaret Rose returned from California as a certified teacher and opened a small school near the ranch, teaching children from the surrounding homesteads. Thomas married in 1908, bringing another daughter-in-law into the family. Catherine and her husband had children. Even young Sarah Jane was being courted by a respectable young rancher. In 1910, Daniel and Olivia celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary. The family gathered at the ranch for a grand party, 3 generations coming together to honor the couple who had started it all. As the sun set on that August evening, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Daniel took Olivia's hand and led her away from the crowd, walking to the spot where they used to sit and watch the sunset in the early days of their marriage. 32 years, he said, sitting beside her on the old bench he had built decades ago. "Do you remember what I told you on our 10th anniversary? You said you would get stuck in that mud 1,000 times over if it meant meeting me. I meant it then, and I mean it now. Olivia, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You saved me that day, not just from being stuck, but from a life of loneliness and drifting. You gave me purpose, a home, a family. You gave me everything." Olivia leaned her head on his shoulder. Her hair was more gray than auburn now, and his face was lined with years of sun and weather, but when she looked at him, she still saw the young cowboy who had laughed with her in the mud. "We gave each other everything," she corrected gently. "You came back, Daniel. You did not have to, but you did. You came back with a ring and a promise, and you have kept that promise every day since." "I will keep it until I die," Daniel said seriously, "and beyond if I can." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky darken and the stars begin to appear. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of their family. Children laughing, adults talking, the clink of dishes as the women cleaned up from supper. This was their legacy. Not just the land or the cattle or even the children, but the love that had created it all. A love that had started with a simple act of kindness. A love that had survived challenges and celebrated triumphs. A love that had grown deeper and stronger with each passing year. As they finally stood to rejoin the party, Olivia paused and looked back at the path that led to their property. Somewhere out there, probably long since washed away by countless rains and snows, was the exact spot where they had met, the exact patch of mud that had changed everything. "You ever wish you could go back?" she asked Daniel, "just for a moment to see that day again?" Daniel considered the question, then shook his head. "No, because going back would mean giving up all of this, even temporarily, and I would not give up a single moment of the life we have built, not for anything. Not even to avoid all that mud," Olivia teased. Daniel laughed, the same genuine laugh she had fallen in love with all those years ago. "Not even to avoid the mud. That mud was the best thing that ever happened to me." They walked back to the house together, hand in hand, surrounded by the family and the life they had created. The future stretched out before their children and grandchildren, full of possibility and promise. But for Daniel and Olivia, the present moment was enough. More than enough. It was everything. As the party wound down and the last guests departed, as the children and grandchildren settled in for the night or headed home to their own places, Daniel and Olivia prepared for bed in the room they had shared for over 3 decades. The routine was comfortable and familiar. Olivia brushing out her hair, Daniel checking that all the doors were locked, both of them moving around each other with the ease of long practice. "It was a good party," Olivia said, climbing into bed. "It was perfect," Daniel agreed, settling in beside her. "Just like everything else you plan." "Oh, please, Margaret Rose did most of the planning. But it was your love that taught her how to bring people together, your kindness that she learned to emulate." Olivia turned to face him in the darkness. "Daniel Webster, after 32 years, you still say the sweetest things." "After 32 years, I still mean them." They fell asleep as they always did, wrapped in each other's arms, grateful for another day together and hopeful for many more to come. The years continued their steady march. Daniel and Olivia aged gracefully, their love providing a foundation not just for their own lives but for the entire extended family that had grown from that chance meeting in the mud. They became the matriarch and patriarch of a thriving clan, their advice sought, their presence cherished. In 1915, they celebrated their 37th anniversary with a quiet dinner at home, just the two of them. Their children had wanted to plan another big party, but Daniel and Olivia had insisted on something simple. "I just want to be with you," Daniel had said. "No fuss, no crowd, just us." So they sat on their porch, now weathered but still sturdy, and shared a meal as the sun set over the land they loved. They talked about everything and nothing, the conversation flowing as easily as it had that first day walking to the Vaughn homestead. "You have any regrets?" Olivia asked as the stars began to appear. Daniel thought for a long moment. "I regret that we lost your father. I would have liked more years with him. And I regret every moment I have spent away from you, even when it was necessary for work. But regrets about our life together. About the choices we made. No, not a single one. Good, neither do I." "What about you? If you could change anything, would you?" Olivia considered the question seriously. "I would have liked more time. More time with Bobby, more time with Papa, more time with everyone we have lost. But I would not change anything about us, about our story. It has been exactly what it needed to be." Daniel reached over and took her hand, his thumb rubbing over the wedding band she still wore every day. "Do you remember what you said when I first asked to court you? You said you would like that." Just those simple words. "I remember. I was trying not to seem too eager." "Were you?" "Eager, I mean," Olivia laughed. "Daniel, I was covered in mud, exhausted, and should have been annoyed at the whole situation. But yes, I was eager. From the moment you started laughing when we fell in the mud together, I was eager. There was something about you, something genuine and good. I saw it right away." "I am glad you did." I am glad you saw me, really saw me, not just a drifter passing through. You were never just a drifter. You were always meant to be more than that. You just needed someone to believe in you. And you did. From that very first day. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, each lost in memories of their life together. Finally, as the night grew cool, they went inside to the warmth of the home they had built together. Time, relentless and unstoppable, continued its forward motion. Margaret Vaughn passed away peacefully in 1916, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. Olivia grieved deeply for her mother, but she took comfort in knowing that Margaret had lived to see her family flourish and thrive. The ranch continued to prosper under the combined efforts of Daniel, Thomas, and Robert. They had expanded to nearly 200 acres now, running 150 head of cattle. It was a far cry from the struggling 40 acres Daniel had bought with his savings all those years ago. In 1918, the world was caught up in the Great War overseas, and even Nevada felt the impact. Robert's eldest son enlisted despite his family's protests, determined to do his duty. The family spent anxious months waiting for news, praying for his safe return. When he finally came home in 1919, thinner and quieter but alive, it felt like a miracle. Through it all, Daniel and Olivia remained each other's constant support and comfort. When Olivia worried about her grandson in the war, Daniel held her and reminded her to have faith. When Daniel struggled with the aches and pains of aging, Olivia was there with patience and understanding. Their love had become the anchor that held the entire family steady through whatever storms came. In 1920, as the nation celebrated the end of the war and women finally gained the right to vote, Daniel and Olivia marked another milestone: 42 years of marriage. They were both in their 60s now, slowing down but still active and engaged with life. Sarah Jane, their youngest, married that year, and with her wedding, all of their children were settled with families of their own. The grandchildren numbered in the dozens now, with great-grandchildren beginning to appear as well. "We have created quite a dynasty," Daniel joked one evening, trying to remember all the names of his descendants. "We have created a family," Olivia corrected. "A family built on love and kindness and hard work. That is better than any dynasty." "You are right, as always." As the 1920s progressed, bringing rapid changes to American society, the Webster Ranch remained a constant, a place where values and traditions were honored even as the world modernized around them. Cars became more common, though Daniel insisted his horse was still more reliable on the rough terrain. Electricity came to Ruby City, though it would be years before it reached the more remote homesteads. Radio brought the world's news into homes that had once been isolated from events beyond their immediate community. Through all these changes, Daniel and Olivia adapted but never lost sight of what mattered most: family, love, kindness to strangers. The values that had brought them together remained the values they lived by. In 1925, Thomas and his wife took over the primary management of the ranch, allowing Daniel to truly retire. He was 70 now, Olivia 68, and while they remained healthy and sharp-minded, the physical demands of ranching had become too much. Daniel found he enjoyed retirement. He spent his days working in the garden with Olivia, playing with great-grandchildren, and taking long walks around the property. Often, he and Olivia would ride out to various spots on the ranch, reminiscing about the years they had spent building this life. One day in late spring, they rode out to the eastern boundary of their property, where the creek ran clear and cold. They dismounted and sat by the water, listening to it burble over the rocks. "You remember," Olivia said, "when this was the edge of Tom Parker's land?" When you were saving up to buy these 40 acres. I remember. I used to come out here on my days off and imagine what it would be like when it was mine, when it was ours. Did you imagine all of this? Everything that came after? Daniel shook his head. I could never have imagined anything this good. I hoped for happiness, for a family, for success, but the reality has exceeded every dream I ever had. Mine too, Olivia agreed softly. They sat for a long time, just being present in the moment, appreciating the beauty around them and the gift of each other's company. These quiet moments had become precious, each one a treasure to be savored. As the afternoon sun began its descent, they mounted their horses and rode slowly back to the house. The journey that had once taken minutes now took longer, but neither minded. There was no rush, nowhere they needed to be except with each other. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching another sunset, Daniel said, "I have been thinking about that day in the mud again." Olivia smiled. "You think about it often." "I do. But today I was thinking about it differently. I was thinking about how many times over the years we have told that story, to our children, to our grandchildren, to friends. It has become almost legendary in our family." "It has," Olivia agreed. "Little Daniel asked me about it just last week. He wanted to know if it was really true that I pulled your whole wagon out of the mud by myself." Daniel laughed. "What did you tell him?" "I told him the truth, that I helped you and together we got unstuck. That is the important part, together." "Together," Daniel repeated. "That is the word that defines us, is it not? Everything we have done together." "Yes. From that first moment working together to free your wagon, to building this ranch, raising our children, creating this life. All of it together." Daniel reached over and took her hand. "Thank you for pulling my cart through the mud that day. Thank you for not riding past. Thank you for every day since." Olivia squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with emotion. "Thank you for coming back. Thank you for the ring. Thank you for keeping your promise. Thank you for loving me for 47 years. "Only 47 so far," Daniel said with a smile. "I plan on many more. As do I." They sat together as darkness fell, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from a chance encounter. Their story would be told, and retold through the generations that followed, becoming part of the family's history and identity. It was a story about kindness meeting kindness. About a woman who stopped to help a stranger, and a cowboy who never forgot, who came back with a ring and a heart full of love. It was a story about mud and laughter and determination. About building a life from nothing but love and hard work. About family and legacy and the power of a single moment to change everything. But most of all, it was a love story. Pure and simple and true. And like all the best love stories, it had a happy ending that lasted a lifetime and beyond, echoing through the generations in the values they instilled, the love they shared, and the family they created. As the stars came out over the Nevada sky, twinkling in the vast darkness, Daniel and Olivia sat together, content in the knowledge that their story was complete. Every chapter had been written, every moment lived to the fullest. They had loved deeply, laughed often, and left a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. The cowboy had returned with a ring, just as he promised, and they lived happily ever after.